Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we document processes and procedures and create management systems for businesses so they can thrive and expand. And today I have a special guest, Keith Callaway from K&L Industries. Now, Keith is a very successful business owner, and he will tell us about K&L and a little bit about himself. But the main reason why he's on this podcast, the System Simplified podcast, is because he grew his business in a matter of a short amount of time, basically 7x his business. And Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Well, I have always considered myself, and still to some degree do, I'm the owner of a mom and pop business. It's just me and my wife and a few guys, and we go out and we earn a living and we try to do our best. That's what I've always seen it as. And we do asphalt paving, primarily. A few other things come with that, but it's mostly asphalt paving, parking lots, driveways. Do a lot of residential, keep the customers happy, and then they talk about us. And that's, of course, every business wants referrals. And so that's kind of what we do.
Good. And you've been doing it for how many years?
The math would indicate that, that it's been almost 35 years. I've been doing paving. I've been in construction longer than that, 38 years.
Wow, incredible, incredible. So for our listeners, if they would like to look at your website and find you, what is your website?
Well, just look up K&L Industries and you will find us.
Absolutely. So definitely.
We have good people that help that be where you can find it.
That's right. So we're going to talk about those systems as well, the marketing systems, etc.
Yeah.
But definitely look them up, K&L Industries, so you can learn more about the company. And let's talk about the growth, the scaling. So as you said, you started as a mom and pop shop. You were about 4 people, including you and your wife, Lillian. And then now you have close to 30 employees, and it just was on a very short amount of time. So what is the number one thing that you attribute this growth to?
The number one thing is just being in the game long enough to create the opportunity. That's the number one thing. So when someone else is discouraged or they're frustrated with their business, in particular in the growth and being able to control that growth, you just need to be in the game, and for us, that meant 3 decades of not waiting, because we went to work every day, but we went out and we did it our best. We tried to build great relationships with customers. I've never considered myself a great businessman, but I am good at relationships. So I go build relationships with customers, try to do them a great job. And then when it started growing, I went, okay, here we go. You get on that wave and you ride it. There are things we could have done a little differently to force that before, but the timing was not good. It was not right for us. And so about 5 years ago, we made some decisions that were the right decisions at the right time, based on that longevity of brand and just being in the marketplace for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's definitely the longevity. So what we can learn from that is persistence, right? If you want to give up, continue. Longevity definitely pays off. But
so for a newer business, it's the same though. Like you said, it's really persistence. I was talking to another business owner, and he said, "Oh man, 35 years. That you're doing great." He was a business owner also, 25 years. I thought, well, I admire him too. And he said, "You must be pretty good at this." And I said, "No, I really don't consider myself good." He said, "You must be." And I said, "Well, just because I can take a lot of pain and that I'm very tenacious doesn't mean I'm a great businessman, and he kind of laughed, and we kind of agreed that it takes tenacity, and it takes being able to handle the things that come at you, even if they're hard, even if they're a little bit painful. so and that's in the short term too. A new business, same thing. There's a lot of pain that comes, but you get up, you put one foot in front of the other, and you do the thing. And just show up each day, and it will create traction. There you go.
Absolutely. But, let's talk about, let's say with our new business owner or somebody who's been in business for 5 years that is listening to our podcast right now. So definitely persist. That's one of it. But I don't know if we want to tell them to wait another 30 years, right? Because
no.
I think you said a very important point that you said is the decision. You made a decision about 5 years ago that something needs to change. So I think that is a point in terms of giving tips to our audience. Make the decision. Now let's talk about that. What decision did you make, and what was the pivoting point there?
Well, we saw some possibilities in our past, like production possibilities. And what if we had enough customers to create more work than we think today that we can do? And then we realized that actually isn't the problem. We could do more work if we were more efficient and hired another person or two that could help us with that little problem. Ends up that's not the biggest problem always. And so that's kind of my answer to that, is that we decided that to open our eyes, I guess, to the possibilities. I'd spent the previous 30 years raising a family, and I cared about paying the bills, and I couldn't take risk. But what I didn't realize is that my mind was closed to the fact that it wasn't as risky as I thought. Like moving forward, especially today, social media and other ways we can advertise and market, yeah, they cost money and they take our time a little bit, but there's opportunities now for networking that never existed 30 years ago.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true. So you made a decision, and that's, again, I'm just like, it is a common denominator of a lot of businesses that when they start growing, they made a decision that they're going to grow, that they're going to scale, that they're going to do whatever it takes. And as you said, it's not, you were able to see that it's not that risky, that it can be done. So now let's break it down to different components, because again, we really want to inspire others that want to grow their business, right? That they want to get to the point where you are at, and you're continuing to grow, and you are now putting systems in place. You and I are working together. You're working with Craig. He's implementing EOS and in your business. So you have different systems that you are implementing. Okay, so let's talk about your marketing. So tell us a little bit about what marketing approach you took that helped you get to where you're at.
Probably the most significant thing we did is we found a couple of lead sources that worked for us. In some areas of construction or other industries, they don't work very well, but for us, they work. They've always worked. There's one of them that I've used for 7 years, and it's a pay per lead. And so there's some disadvantages to that, but I noticed that it did create a significant percentage of the work we had, and that was fairly consistent throughout the last 7 years plus. And so I started just putting that throttle down a little further every year, and spending just a little bit more. And the percentage of jobs never went down. It always kind of eked up a little bit. So it made it worth it. So that's one thing. And then we found other areas of marketing similar to that, along with trying to do the important things of a website and SEO and some of these other things that kind of make us more relevant on Google. And of course, I'm an older guy, so I don't really get how it all works, but I know that when I get on, I'm a consumer, so I kind of see it from that side, right?
Absolutely. But you also you use a lot of videos as well in order to promote the company. So that's great. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, we decided about 2.5 years ago that there's a couple things we wanted to do. We wanted to be more relevant in our market, but we wanted to be a change agent for our industry. So asphalt paving as an industry, at least in America, kind of has a black eye. It's a bunch of crude, rude people that are always in people's way out in the roads and these kinds of things, and grimy people that usually use bad language and don't have a very nice attitude. And we're not that, we don't live that way. So we wanted to be a change agent for that. And we started meeting people around the country that are like us, that, they'd really like to have a possibility of changing the industry a little bit if possible from the standpoint of just making it more positive, a more positive thing. And then being able to recruit people into it is another huge part of that. So we decided to hire an in-house video guy. So we brought him on our payroll. He's one of the people that's with us now. And so at least once a week, a video is produced, and we through our another media company, we make sure that there's postings out there consistently in almost all the platforms. So the videos are really important. People love those. They connect with our people. We just heard from a couple of people in the last 2 weeks where they got on our website and they looked at the testimonials of the customer testimonies were important, but when they got to the employee testimonials, that just sold them. They said, okay, this is the company we want because these people obviously like working here. So, there's a lot of approaches, and you have to have a lot of approaches. And you have
Absolutely.
to look at several pieces. But something strikes the drum, so to speak, with most people. So
for sure. And I think that idea of the videos and the testimonials and the constant content that you put out there, that's a great advice. That is a great method of doing it, for sure. Okay, so we talked about the marketing. Now let's talk about the internal systems. So why are systems important? If you were talking to a business owner that does not have systems, what would you say in terms of why do you need systems and how did it help you? And let me preface that before I know I asked you the question, but now I want to say something about it. People have systems. You had systems on how you did different things, right? Like right now we are working on documenting your processes and procedures, and you have a way of doing it. It's not like all of a sudden you're inventing systems. So probably some of our listeners say, I have systems, but what's the importance of actually documenting it, putting it on actual, we'll call it electronic paper, right? Because we're writing it all electronically. What difference does it make? What's the importance of it?
Well, I'll just step back a moment and agree with you. What I was going to say is we had systems. They were just right here. And my mind is not particularly organized or efficient. So for me, as I was going through my day or my motion, unless it was on the job site, which I had practiced thousands of times, the systems were a little all over the place. So I needed to narrow those down. And a conversation yesterday with my sales team helped me understand, now that we have a sales process that we can put in front of them in electronically or on paper, and most of them had it on paper so they could page through it and see it. The reason we do that for them is because we want them to feel like they're doing it well, and that they have all the tools. Like if we miss a spot, if they are consistently missing something and they're getting flack from the field that they missed it, or from the office because they didn't do it right, then we want them to go back and say, okay, and have it in print, say, there it is. That's what I'm missing. I just need to add that to what I'm doing. It doesn't take any more time. It's just one more step. The other thing we found is that they get to contribute. Now that we've written the system, so to speak, the process, now we're at the point of implementation where they get to have input, and we can add that to it as tools. Like each little section of it, there should be a little set of toolboxes that they can pull those tools out in different situations and use those tools. And so that's what I see is really good. I have a lot of tools in my head of how I do things, and I get to that point in conversations with my sales team. So in this case, but we don't often hone in and put it on paper and say, let's keep that tool in front of us,
right,
so we can use it next week, so we can use it tomorrow. And we'll just forget about it. And then, oh man, I wish I'd have done such and so.
Absolutely. And, and one of the things also is the efficiency, right? Is able to do the same actions, but in a less amount of time. Like we were talking before the call, and We talked about it actually yesterday when we met, in terms of like, how can we create the same motions, same actions, but with less amount of time, right? So if we talk, let's for instance look at a sales procedure. So if you have, what's important is the percentage of jobs that are actually closed that is going up, right? Because you can send a guy out there and an estimator, and they can spend a couple of hours with each lead, and let's say they have 4 leads a day, so that's 8 hours, and they only close one. That's a 25% ratio, right? So, but if we basically can make it so they can see 2 people and close one, that's a 50% ratio, still the same product, but you don't have to drive all over town for 8 hours. So by having those processes and being able to identify the different aspects of it, like follow-up, or how to be more efficient with your write-ups, the creating the estimate, etc., you can actually create that efficiency.
Right. And salespeople are inherently inefficient. I put myself in that same category.
Right, because you want to go to the next deal, and you like to talk to people. I mean, that's what I find, that salespeople are, well, they have to be really good communicators, right? And like people, and they feel like they have to see the next lead. But really there's a lot to do with the follow-up. And that's why having a procedure for the follow-up that is agreed by everyone is extremely important.
Yeah. So we're working on the implementation of that, the mindset, because it's a mindset. It's not just, well, I'm going to do it. You have to kind of switch your mind a little bit to being willing, and then realize that there's an end game of pushing that sales percentage up. Even if it's 3 to 5%, that's a lot.
It is definitely a lot. And and I observed you, and you're a great leader in terms of the way that you lead your team to change, because it's true, you have estimators that have been doing the same thing over and over for years, right? So why change? So what are some of your approaches to change and to implement change within your team?
Well, it does seem to be based on the person to some degree. I'll give an example of that. I realized I had a lunch meeting with one of the sales guys about 4 weeks ago now, and there was a couple of reasons I needed to talk to him, and they weren't particularly easy things to talk about. So I brought them up. We talked through them. At least one of them, there was no real resolve on it. But he called me later that afternoon and said, "Thank you so much for that time. That was really good." And I walked away thinking that we didn't even get to first base. Not only did we not hit a home run, we didn't even get on base. It was not great as far as I was concerned, but he thought it was good. So since then, I've decided that about every 2 or 3 weeks, he and I are going to have a lunch meeting or something where we just are face to face and just talking, no agenda. And he just needs that from me, and I actually need that from him. So that's an example of how I can get him to buy in to the things that are not as comfortable by being more relational in the process. So I'm building capital. I'm making deposits in his emotional bank, so that when I say, "Mark, I need you to do this thing for me because I think it's going to eventually be better for you," then I'll pull that money out, so to speak, and I'll use that as part of the exchange, and then he'll buy into what I'm saying a lot more, because we have the relationship that will give that foundation for that kind of training, that kind of me asking him for something different. And
absolutely,
it's with all of these guys.
Absolutely. No, it's there's the saying that people do business with people that they know, like, and trust, right? Yeah. But I think it also applies to employment and employees, because they will follow a leader that they know, like, and trust. They know you better when you're actually communicating with them. You are sitting in front of them, you're taking them to lunch, you're interested in them, they like you, they trust you. So when you bring up new ideas, there is less of that resistance that usually happens when we're trying to implement change. Right. And they might be willing to look at it, and then they will follow you with the change.
Right. And that's my goal. The point is to get better. I'm talking to my entire company always about what if we get 1% better every week? What does that actually mean? And
Right.
what if we did that for 2 years in a row? What would that mean? And so they're starting to buy into the idea that we can go from really good, and we are really good, but we could go from good to great and be uncompromisingly the best. And I think most of them are really buying into that mental goal. And so I'm trying to change their mindset by just kind of putting this in their mind, this what if? What are the possibilities here? And so it's kind of fun to watch the lights come on.
Absolutely. And I love it. The gradual increase until you actually become the best, which is very good advice as well. So let me summarize what I learned so far. So we learned that you have to be persistent, don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Make the decision that you want to grow and scale and change the way you're operating if you don't like the way you're operating, or if you want to look at the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Be in great communication. And as a leader, you have to communicate to your team, implement systems, be out there and do things that might not be comfortable, but it also gives the communication out, such as the videos that you are making and trying different marketing actions, and be a leader that others will follow, right? And look ahead. I know you always look ahead. So maybe you can share with us what are the years to come look like? What is ahead?
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at that question, of course. I'm headed towards 60 years old soon. So my looking ahead doesn't have retirement in my future, probably, but I would like to volunteer more and be available for more things where I get to help more people. I love helping my crew. I love seeing my team help their lives get better. I love that. And so that's kind of my personal thing. And actually my wife and my son, who work side by side with me every day, that's their goals too. So we're trying to work ourselves out of a job, which means that the processes are a huge part of that. So when we bring somebody into the office to work, or into the production field to work, then we can actually hand them a manual and then train them through that manual, and a number of months, a year later, whatever, then they're proficient. Well, that's why we're doing this. And it is painful. It is not easy. And yet we see the end game, and that gives us more time to do what we really feel like we're on the earth to do. So that's one side of it, of course, the personal side, and that's probably more motivating than anything else. But the company side, we set a 10-year target of having 1,000 5-star reviews. Okay, so that's a lot. Okay, because not all of them are going to be 5-star. Maybe half if you're very fortunate. So that means we have to have a lot of contact with customers. And in our industry, if you have 100 reviews online, you're pretty good. But if we have 1,000, we're already great, right? And so it's part of our trajectory we're kind of looking at as a company. And we rolled that out to all of our people. And the guy all the way at the bottom, quote, the bottom, who's just running a shovel, if he understands that's what our goal is in 10 years, then he probably can learn that he has a part in that by making sure he does a really good job, that his work is clean and precise and finished well. And so it's part of the buy-in. We're trying to get people to understand that that each person is part of that goal. And that goal makes all of us great, which in turn, of course, makes our lives better at home. Right. So that's what really gets me going, is how are they doing at home? How are they doing with their families? Are they buying the house they want to buy? Are they getting to their next step? Are they getting the emotional and mental stimulation and encouragement they need here and in their life? And if they aren't, then I might be bold enough to sit down and give them some advice. But part of that process for us is yearly goal setting with them. Right. And that, boy, this year was really intense at times. Some of them, it wasn't anything big, but we had all the way from just some facts and figures to tears. Guys sat down and said, here's what I really want in my life. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a hard one to do, but why don't we work on that? And so we'll see how some of that goes, but it's really good to get it out there and make them feel like what they want in their life is important.
That's incredible, Keith. I mean, it comes across your care and how much you value your employees. And it's really like we started at the beginning of the podcast in terms of it's a mom and pop shop. And yes, you grew beyond just Lillian and yourself and Keith Jr., but you have that care, like you're caring for your employees like they are your family. And that is, from my observation, a big key to your success. And the way that you treat your employees, what you just described, that's the way you treat your customers as well. And your business relationship, your vendors, etc. So that I really think we nailed it in terms of one of the key components of success. Wouldn't you say so?
I agree. One of the things I always look at, and it's not original with me, I stole it from someone else, is, when I finish my life, there's a lot of different ways you can say it. When I finish my life and I stand in front of God and I meet the person that I was supposed to be, am I close or am I still a long ways from that? So I look at that and I say, well, I have a little glimpse, just a little glimpse of who I'm supposed to be in this life. And that means I need to work on it now because it's too late later. So that's what drives me every day. And of course, I have a lot of grandkids and I want to be there for them, over the next 20 years and influence their lives and the next generation after them, hopefully. So there's a lot of reasons to keep going and learn more and be stimulated myself. So it's not like I can sit here and do nothing, that's for sure.
That was great. That was a great analogy. And with that, we're coming to the end of our podcast. And I wanted to thank you again for being a guest. Keith from K&L Industries. Go to the website, check out the videos, and get inspired. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.